Hello, my name is Niall Mulligan, and today I'm going to be walking through code explanation of my CA3 for C++ multiplayer distributed programming. This is a continuation of the code base that I submitted for my initial CA3. So there's stuff that's explained in the first video that is explained in the first video that will be linked in the description below, and I'll explain stuff that I've done. So to just explain what the game is, it's very similar to the original game. The sprites have been changed to kind of create a new game. I'm going to stick it on and play it now. I'm just going to explain some of the things to set it up. So when the player pulls this down, one of the issues that I was having with Git was that it wasn't pulling down the DLLs. So you're gonna if you're familiar with the game, you'd understand what they are and where they go. They'll go in here. So first thing I did was I changed the sprites. This was the original player. The player is now this, and the original thing to avoid, which was in the very original game, was the mouse, which was the thing you had to get. Was now an asteroid. So I was going for an asteroids theme. I've also added a new object to the game called health. I called it health in this for simple reasons. I figured out halfway through that the original game had mouse as a health pickup, but we had the game that I had used was already using mouse as a way to decrement health. So I just went and added a new item that wasn't moving because we had changed the mouse to move across the screen. So this health object stays still. If you pull this game down, if you want to play it, you go into the assets, into the inputs, and then go onto your own computer, get your IP, and put it in here, and then the name of the player. You put in the name of your player. I'll start it up now and show how it plays. Now, when you run the server, you don't get any message that it's running. So I just run the game. I've lowered the game threshold so that 2 players does start the game. And there you go. Now I'll explain stuff that's happening in a few minutes. I'm just going to run around and show off some basic stuff. You can see in the top corner my score and my health. The color of the player is the color of the color of the name here is the color of your icon. You can see here that the winner was Mulligan. This was player 2, and I got a score of 95. Now, if I exit out and go into, I've gone into the debug folder, and there's a leaderboard.txt. I ran this a couple times. The latest entry is Mulligan, and the score was 95. This is a form of persistence that I've been using as basically a leaderboard to keep the names and the scores of the people that win. So one of the first things I did was I changed the assets. So I added 3 different textures, or sprites. They are. A ship, which is the player; an asteroid, which is the thing the player has to avoid; and a health, which is the thing the player wants to pick up. Now I have added a health object. So what I did was I made So one of the first things I did was I added a health pickup. So to do that, I needed to add a health item into the game. So basically what I done was I took the original mouse, or what we used as Octa stuff, and I made a carbon copy of it. So this health client pickup is just a copy of the mouse pickup. There's health client. Let's look for mouse client. Mouse client. It's very much the same. It doesn't need as much because the health is staying still. It doesn't need any of the velocity stuff because it's not moving. Again, with more of the .h stuff, and then for the server side, the more of the same code. Again, its velocity is going to be 0. Creating the identifier and stuff. I then began, most of my work was mostly done on the server. Was basically trying to get some of the gameplay stuff to work. So this is mostly this is majority of stuff. I had tried to get a delay into the game so that the asteroids wouldn't spawn until a certain time, so that the players had time to go around and pick up health. That didn't really work. So what I decided to do was, and it's a bit risky, was get the score of the first player with the player ID of 1, and it spawns a health pack every time their score is divided by is divisible by 10 and the remainder is 0 when the mod of 10 is 0, when the modulus of that number by 10 is 0. The reason I done this was because before that I just had creating a random mouse and creating a random health pack at the same rate. As you saw in the gameplay a few minutes ago, there was a lot of asteroids, so in the beginning there was a lot of health packs. This helps trim it down significantly, and I think it works a lot better than what it was originally. I spent a lot of time trying to do this. I still have a couple of hours, so I might try and implement this line of code properly, which is basically to put in a lobby. Now it's kind of I'd call it a fake lobby. Kind of be like one of the battle royale lobbies where the players are on the map, but the game doesn't start until 20 seconds after the server started. The score won't start until there's enough players in the game. So I think I could put all this in a while loop, and while player 1's score is less than 200, don't do this. While it's greater than 200, do this. And then I could do that when it writes it to the file. When I get the player score, I could just decrement it by 200. That would give me a kind of lobby. It would give people time to join in. I could probably set it to 1,000 to give people enough time to join in. It depends. I'm going to ask people for opinions on how long the time should be and if it should be done at all. The next thing I did was added persistence. We didn't have persistence in the last game. I think it was just something we didn't focus on. I think we tried to focus on making the gameplay fun, which is I think something we achieved in the last game, which is why I didn't really stray too far from it. So this is basically a write to file method. It's going to the scoreboard manager, which is where we, if you watch the gameplay back again, it's what's writing the player name and the player ID and the player score to the screen at the very end. So when that happens, this is called, it gets the player name, it gets the score, it writes it to that file, puts in a new line, and then closes it. I've used a Boolean to set this so that it only does it when it'll only do it while it's false, so that it will only do it once during the game, which is when the game ends. This method only gets called when the game ends, and that's the reason, because if it does it before the game ends, it's going to write I don't know what player it's going to get, and I also don't know what score it's going to put in. So when the thing ends, it calls this. I have a Boolean set in the .h for this file that's setting it to false, or setting it to false. Well, it's false too, yeah. And sets it to true at the end so that doesn't write over it. Pretty simple. One of the last things was I spent a lot of time actually working on this itself. I had originally tried to set it so that I tried to work it like this so that I could get the score time, and every time, because score time was basically being used for the player score, I just used 8 as an arbitrary number. I decided to bring it up to 10 to make it a bit more uniform, and it looks a bit more nicer. It doesn't spawn too fast. But that wasn't working, and there was times when it wouldn't call create random health at all, and sometimes it would, and even still then it was spawning health at a large rate. It took me a while to realize that these numbers were floats, and that these numbers were the spawn rates. So if I crank that up to 2, it's going to spawn twice as much health, and if I crank this up to 2, it's going to spawn twice as many mice. Another idea I have been thinking about, I'm not sure whether to implement it or not, is if the score is modulus by 1,000 and the remainder is 0, I could add another one to this. Instead of just create random mouse with a spawn rate 1, I could crank it up to 2, spawning more mice, which are asteroids, therefore making the game harder, so that eventually it would become too difficult for the player to survive and they would lose, which would force an endgame. And one of the last things I was asked to talk about was the actual networking stuff itself. Now, all I really did was test the drop packet chance and the simulated latency, which is basically how well can you still play the game while you drop packets and have potentially high latency. When I did check these, I kind of just tested one at a time. So I tested the drop packet chance, and to be honest, I got the same kind of answer for the simulated latency. They were just about playable when they were 0.1. I imagine the drop packet chance was much worse than the simulated latency. The drop packet chance was like it was choppy. It's exactly how it sounds. You're not getting as many packets, which means you're not getting the most up-to-date frame, which is why it was choppy. The latency was playable, but was annoying because while I was testing it, there was a couple of times where I was on 1 health. I thought I had picked up a health packet, and an asteroid had hit me first. So I could see that being a bit of an issue. So these were most of the things that I tested. I'm probably going to do another video explaining the original stuff from the game in better detail. So there's probably going to be another video after this. It'll probably be like a playlist on YouTube or something. So there should be a recommended, or go on to try and flick through the channel and find the other video. Thank you very much for listening. If there's any questions, please leave them in a comment below, or if you want to email me about potentially game breaking stuff in my code, fire me an email. There should be an email attached to the YouTube channel. So thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.